Welcome to the CXO Secret Sauce series powered by Akamai and YourStory. Today we have an exciting CXO from the hotbed of startups in the country, Mr. Srinivas Kollipara, COO of T-Hub. So, Srini, maybe let's start with you as a person, right? What is your mission and goal in life?
It's an interesting question. So I have to start with a little family history because that's shaped who I am and in turn has shaped what T-Hub has become, etc. So I grew up in a family where my grandfather was a communist leader, had built a bunch of different schools and hospitals, a lot of service for his community. And he always told me that at the end of the day, life is short, our time is finite, but if you can help other people to scale and live better lives, at least it's been worthwhile. Yeah. So that's something that I kind of grew up with. Of course, I went on my own path and straight out of college, I started a small company that I eventually sold, worked in biotech, and then of course, the dot-com boom happened. We were doing some body shopping here because that was the easy thing to do. But it took me to the US, where I was a consultant in Silicon Valley during the exciting times of the dot-com boom. And of course, the dot-com bust also. But that's when the whole startup bug first bit me. So even though I was working in corporate at that point in time, I was surrounded by people who were going out and building companies or joining companies. And that bug stayed with me over a period of time, although I didn't join the startup community at that point. I've also been somebody who's always built communities. So, again, from my grandfather's legacy, it's always been about building communities, whether it's social or corporate or personal. Came back to India back in 2003 and was working with my father's biotech company, actually. And that was great. It was doing well. We were working in anti-cancer, noble cause. But my heart wasn't in that at the time. So I started to think about what it is that I want to do in my life, right? The money is great, but is there something more that I could do? And of course, I was using those things that seem cliche. There's those 4 circles, and you're supposed to find the middle, which is what are you good at, what do you love, what does the world want, and what does the world... Yeah, exactly, sure. So that I was looking at that whole thing, and it's got to build on what you've already done because your skills need to be there, but it has to go to the future of where you want to be. And I put down a bunch of things that I definitely needed if I was going to be satisfied with this piece for the rest of my life. And there were again things that sound cliche, but I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to work with passionate people. The last thing I want is somebody who's coming on Monday morning and groaning about it and leaving at 5 o'clock saying, I'm done, right? And that's what led me to startups. I realized that that's a place that possibly with my product management, product strategy background, with all of my contacts, I grew up in England. So my UK connections, my US connections in India, maybe that's a space I could do it. I started to do that. I started to mentor startups pro bono in the beginning just to see, is this making a difference? And what I realized was that, yes, I was able to make some difference, but they required more. They required mentors, they required investors, they required customers, they needed people to get their story out, journalists. Nothing was available. It was really hard to connect to all of these things. Although there were passionate people doing certain things. And so what I thought was, let me experiment in building this startup community just so I can bring people together, which is what I'm already good at, so that everyone helps themselves. And that was the genesis of this journey. We've got an incredibly strong benefactor in the Telangana government. Yeah. The model was always that we stay independent. And by the way, when I first pitched this to the minister, I fully expected him to say no. I told him, look, I need your government money because a lot of things that we do are not going to be profitable in the beginning. I need your support and potentially influencing the policies, but I cannot give you too much influence on what we do. We have to be able to pivot quickly and experiment, which again, governments are not good at. Yeah. Typically, if they allocate money for a specific thing, you have to do that thing whether it works or not. Yeah. And he said, yeah, sure, let's do that. And so we work with the government to create this space for startups to succeed, helping with the innovation policies, simplifying policies that are getting in the way of our entrepreneurs, creating schemes in the innovation policy that help startups to scale as well. That's the government on one side. Working with the corporates and saying, okay, you guys have challenges, let us help you find startups that will solve those challenges for you. Working with the investors, finding those right people. So yeah, this looking at all of these pieces together is what I think is the secret sauce for us.
Let's take people on the workings of T-Hub as an entity, right? I'd like to understand how T-Hub actually helps propel startups that are part of its cohort. That is one. And do you think you can share some success stories in its journey thus far?
The first thing you need to do if you want to build out a startup ecosystem is build density. You can't do much with small communities. As it gets bigger, you can do more. And so the idea was, how do you build more of everything required? More incubators, more seed funds, more angel investors, more startups, of course. And so my first tagline for T-Hub was an incubator of incubators. So use the network effect, right? Yeah. There are people working with communities of startups who do not necessarily have the latest methods of helping their startups to scale, but they're passionate. Yeah. So work with them. Work with them to build out their communities. Work with them to make sure they are successful. Do networking events that draw more people in. Do events that teach entrepreneurs who are doing this for the first time, how do you validate ideas? Yeah. Because that's one area that they struggle, etc. Right? And so for the first 2 years, that's what we focused on. I think that story has played out really well. When I had this idea of turning Hyderabad into a startup city pre-T-Hub, there were less than 200 startups that had been registered as startups. There were literally a handful of incubators, one angel network, one VC, very small. Today, and of course, Hyderabad, whenever a story was done on startup cities in India, Hyderabad was never mentioned. Yeah. 5 other cities were mentioned, never Hyderabad. Today, that's come full circle, you know. Yeah. Pretty often, we're said in the same breath as Bangalore. Yeah. Now, to be clear, we are much smaller, but at least we're growing very, very fast, and so that journey is done. We believe, over 2,000 startups registered. This is all in 4 years, or less than 4 years. We have the most number of DST-funded incubators in the country, several of which are very, very specialized. We have a molecular biology incubator, etc. Right? 3 agricultural incubators. There are 4 angel networks now. There are multiple seed funds. The number of angel investors has gone up massively, etc. So that story is played out. And if you go back to the mission, which was turn Hyderabad into a startup city, you realize that if there's already so many incubators and co-working spaces, we don't need to do that anymore. Correct. Let them take care of the early stage. What you need now is you need success stories. Yeah. Right? That's the next question. Okay, great, you've got 2,000 startups, but who are your rock stars? And so we then move to plan 2, which is, how do you find the best startups here? How do you attract the best from around the world? Because every city that's gone big has had companies come in, whether it's Bangalore or Silicon Valley. A lot of startups are from elsewhere. And then how do you help all of them scale? And so we do that through 5 different business units today. The first business unit is the building itself, which is now a true incubator. When we started out, we called it an incubator. It was really a co-working space. As long as you could pay the fees, you would get a seat. Today, we have an application process. You have to apply online, go through a very strict filtering process, and we take startups in. We just started a new batch of 68 startups. Wow. This is by far the largest incubator in the country, and one of the largest in the world. I mean, 68 is a daunting number. Yeah, it is. And so there's a team of people who are using interventions of various types, from validation to sales cycles to digital marketing, etc. Right? The whole gamut of everything that a startup could need. And so all of those are available along with mentors for these startups over a 6-month period. So that's a program that we run, and that's one way that we help startups in that piece. We have a corporate innovation division, and that's business unit 2. And that is, again, we help corporates, large multinationals typically actually, to figure out which area would they like to engage with the startup ecosystem. Once they have that clarity and we help them to find that space, we create a program for them that goes out, talks about this program, sources these guys from either around the country or around the world, depending on what the program mandate is, helps the corporate to filter it down to the top 8, 10, whatever they're looking at, scale those guys, and potentially have them integrate that solution into their own stack. Yep. And so today we're doing 4 programs at the same time. One with Boeing, one with Facebook on VR, one with HSBC, and one with Stanley Black & Decker. Again, no one has ever attempted 4 large corporate programs at the same time. And these are typically 6 months to a year long. And so that's business unit 2. And obviously the interventions that happen there are specific to the corporate that is putting out that challenge. Business unit 3 is the international program. So that one is coming up soon, all of the programs in that space. One of those programs is our own internal program, which is one demand that we notice is a lot of large startups abroad are looking at India as a market. It's a very tough market. We understand it. We understand the culture here. We understand the complexity of India. We can teach that to them. If it's the right fit, we can help them localize their product, figure out the right sales channels, and open those doors. And so this is for approximately 5 startups that we're figuring out which ones they will be, but we're looking at these 5 startups that are typically Series A, Series B, and beyond, because they have to have a certain scale, and that's an internal program. The other flavor international programs that are kicking off soon are these exchange programs. Now in India, unfortunately, most exchange programs really are just marketing and photo opportunities where they go sit in another country for a couple of weeks in an incubator, do a tour, and they're done. T-Hub, we don't do that. We're only talking about programs that make an impact on those startups. Then our 4th business unit is the advisory. What we found is that we have a lot of startups that are doing really well, but they're struggling to raise funding, and for various reasons. We know the VC world. We know all of those VCs out there. We can talk to the partners. We can help the startup figure out which is the right VC for them, and also polish up these guys so that they're ready to be fundable and get them that funding. So that's another way that we help our startups. The final business unit that is just kicking off now helps startups indirectly. And what that is that a question we get asked often is, are you going to expand into other cities and states?
We just spoke about it.
And we're saying, no, not really. We're happy here. Having said that, we have a lot of learning of what works and what doesn't work. And we've done fairly well. Can we extend that knowledge to other people? And so we have multiple states coming to us and saying, can you help us build out our ecosystem? And so what we're talking about is doing a 3 to 5 year contract where we do consulting for a state, where we figure out that their unique strategy and blueprint for their state, help them create that plan, monitor it, execute it along with PwC Innovation, actually. And so that's the final one. Hopefully that will help those state startups to scale. And again, that becomes a potential funnel into our programs, of course, which are helping startups around the country to scale. So these are the multiple ways that we help our startups.
It's like a universe in itself, right? And it's funny that you call yourself a startup. With such a big ecosystem around, what do entrepreneurs or innovators need to do to leverage this ecosystem correctly? Like, are there certain silver bullets that they can keep in order to tap the ecosystem right?
So one thing is obviously stay informed. Make sure that you are looking at what is going on at T-Hub. Look at what's going on at the various incubators and stuff. Don't stay inside your office and not looking beyond, right? Connect to the government and see, are there schemes that they could avail of? So it's really just figuring out what is going on and plug yourself in. Going back to the culture conversation, right? One of the things that, there's a story about Silicon Valley that people quote, that back in the 1990s, Silicon Valley and Boston were almost at the same stage of evolution. And yet today, Silicon Valley, Boston is popular, for medtech.
For many other reasons,
But Silicon Valley is undoubtedly the ecosystem, right? And one of the things that, when they went back and studied it, one of the things they said that was the difference was there were tough periods in the global economy at that period of time, late 90s, right? Mid 90s. The two ecosystems reacted very differently. Boston is a very traditional manufacturing area. And so everybody hunkered down inside their offices and figured out how do they survive this economic situation. The Silicon Valley guys, on the other hand, went out and started talking to each other and saying, what do we do to help each other to thrive? And that culture, I think, is one thing that as a startup you must have. The pay it forward culture. Help each other out without expecting things in return. And it will come back to you. It sounds a very philosophical, spiritual type thing, but it clearly works. And so get out there, help other people, be in the know, take advantage of your ecosystem. And the ecosystem, again, is a very broad term. It's really comprising of every single person. Everyone in here is part of that ecosystem.
Yeah. The other thing I read about recently was the formation of a cybersecurity division in Hyderabad.
Yes.
And that's pretty that's fantastic, right? This is something that is there in certain pockets of the world, and it's great to have that pocket here in Hyderabad. Right? Is there a cybersecurity focus in the community as such, or do you think that there's enough existing potential to build solutions across industries in the security domain here?
We have a lot of large corporates that are thinking about cybersecurity in the first place, right? In the whole country, honestly, cybersecurity is not being focused on enough.
Yep.
You must have heard of people being worried about Chinese routers being used all over the place and what happens if they try and shut us down. Cybersecurity is getting more and more sophisticated all the time, but governments are now going to open data platforms, not thinking of the security side of it. You make everything available, obviously hackers are able to siphon it out. We don't ever think local. We're not talking about just Hyderabad. We are talking about for the country. And so as I mentioned with the T-Hub model, don't try and do everything alone. Bring in partners to do things. So what we did was we tied up with the Hague Security Delta in The Hague in the Netherlands. They're the leading cybersecurity cluster in Europe, leading and the largest. Why reinvent the wheel, right? They have a model called the triple helix model, which is very, very similar to my T-Hub model of corporate, government, academic, and pulling them all together into one. And so the Hyderabad Security Council has been formed. We are partnered with them. We're learning from them, putting all these pieces together. The corporate guys are coming in and saying, okay, we have a security council already. We will help do some pieces of this. We're pulling in the educational institutes from NALSA, which does the legal side, to IIIT and IIT that do the tech side. So all of this is happening. Cybersecurity is one of the things that the government of Telangana also is very focused on, I believe. And so, this will feed into that piece.
What is your leadership style, and how do you actually percolate the ethos of T-Hub amongst your employees?
I think I try and teach all of the people that join us. Everybody that joins us is joining us because they are passionate about what we do. None of them are doing it for their salary. And one of the things that I'm proud of is that when we started this whole thing, it was impossible to hire anyone from outside of Hyderabad, right? The culture that we've built today is such that now we've got a Portuguese guy working with us. We've got a Russian girl. We've got a German girl heading our international piece. We have a bunch of American people. We've got people from all around the world are now joining our team. And that's a symbol of the culture that we have. And many of these people reached out to us saying, we love what you guys are doing. We want to come to India specifically to work with you and build this culture. That culture is, how do you help your customer, which is your startup? Right? Don't look at what you want. Secondly, how do you operate yourself as a startup, as I said? I keep teaching my people about operating as a startup. Don't think of generalities, right? Pick specific areas, get good at that piece, understand what you're trying to do, and build that out, and be really passionate about it.
Thank you, Srini, for being part of the CXO series.